Welcome to Global View. Today, we are honored to join a powerful voice in American politics, a successful entrepreneur and executive director of the National Diversity Coalition for Trump, Mr. Bruce LeVell. Bruce has been at the forefront of shaping national conversation on economic empowerment, political outreach, and bringing up communities. Bruce LeVell's background includes top media surrogate for President Trump, with over 400 national TV and radio appearances during the 2016 and 2020 campaigns, national delegate at the 2016 Republican National Convention. Thanks so much for joining Global View. It's an honor to have you here.
Yeah, thanks.
Bruce, you are one of President Trump's most trusted advisors. What was the biggest misconception about his leadership style that you personally witnessed?
Well, we'll go back to 2015. I think one of the misconceptions, which actually helped birth the Diversity Coalition, was this rumor and lie about him being a racist. that was probably the one that was probably one of the biggest outside of the Russian hoax collusion. But that one in itself, and I think really what inspired and catapulted the Diversity Coalition was the fact that, here's a guy that's been out into the public's eye for 30, 40 years before he came down the escalator. He was on the, Bobby Brown video, he's been in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and many other appearances over the years and, just very visible, probably one of the most visible presidents we've ever had. And I say visible, meaning I say the most vetted, where he was so exposed to everyone that everyone knew him. It was no surprise or secret or mystery, if you use that term, like we had with Barack Obama, which we'll put it right there. But I think that was one of the biggest things that, obstacle we had to come over, because obviously the mainstream media, and George remembered this too back in the early times, that, they pretty much ganged up and huddled up and said, all right, we got a new play, CNN, MSNBC, all mainstream media, like we're in a huddle saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. He's going to be a racist. We're going to drive it. We're going to drive it. We're going to drive it. And we're going to create this narrative. And I personally didn't think it was going to stick the way it did, but it grew some wings and it flew hard. It was a really hard stereotype to fight back against.
Bruce, I love talking to people that were there from the beginning. I know you've been there from the beginning, and only a handful of people really were there from the inception of MAGA, America First, and Donald Trump's ascendancy to not only the Oval Office in 2016, but of course, this past election. So my question, let's go back to the beginning. Why do you think, given, like you just said, Donald Trump was such a massive media figure? He had friends from all religions, ethnic groups. He's a New Yorker. Why do you think that the mainstream media in 2015 wanted to paint him as a racist? Where do you think that brainchild came from? I mean, because it seems so odd and so bizarre that somebody of his background to even have that painted against him. So where do you even think that came from? Let's just start there for a second.
Well, I'm going to date myself. I go back volunteering for Ronald Reagan, and I hate to say it, they did Reagan the same way. As a matter of fact, I got persecuted in high school and mocked and made fun of way back then in 1980. And fast forwarding that, when George H. came on the scene after Reagan, we went through the same thing. And of course, after that, we had Clinton, they did Bob Dole that way. And of course, they went after George W. the same way. However, George, to your point, for some reason, this scene had more toxicity to it. It just felt like, damn, I've been through this before, but this one, this right here feels like, ugh, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, here's a person that did not birth themselves through, I use that term respectfully, from, the political world. Most of these guys that have been in office were former senators or former governors or House reps, et cetera, have been, elected officials or in some capacities many, many years, whereas President Trump has never ran for office. And so the other thing too, being fearless with the media, most most politicians or elected officials historically won't admit to this, but they were generally scared of the press, but they would never admit it. And so the press knew that. You know, of course, the worst thing about press, if they smell blood in the water, you're in trouble. And with President Trump, that wasn't the case. He would bite back, snap back, get up in your face, and like call you for fake news and whatever he wanted. And they weren't used to that, so it was kind of like, okay, well, we'll show him. We're going to get him. And so it created this "I'm going to get you." And the press has never been dealt with the way President Trump has dealt with them. And it was pretty much George, like, how dare you? How dare you do this? Do you know who we are? We're the kingmakers. And the American public has been sold a bag of goods for over years that, that they've been pretty much, I hate to say this, brainwashed to a degree of whatever the press said this, well, they said that. And essentially that's how they sold their candidates. And they said, well, we're going to sell the American people that President Trump is a racist. So they're going to use that narrative. And they drove it, man. They drove it hard. Oh my Lord, they drove it hard, and it was rough, man. You kind of got me thinking back to a lot of the hits I did, because Pastor Daryl and I, Pastor Daryl, we started a coalition. I remember how toxic going on CNN, MSNBC, and people's like, man, why do y'all do that? And I said, if I could just have one segment where I could have some voice of reasoning, somebody in there will hear some reasoning. And that's something that always kept me motivated. And plus, the other thing too, as a Christian, I always said, if you're going to really try to lead someone to Christ, you got to go in there where the people that don't believe in Christ. I said, we could all sit in the room and say, oh, we like Christ, but then, okay, we're preaching to the choir. So it has been a challenge, to always go out into the unfamiliar, uncomfortable places and uncomfortable platforms, because I don't turn any press down. It doesn't intimidate me. And that's been my motivating factor, that like, hey, let's get a message out there. And that's essentially what President Trump does on his huge megaphone that he uses through the mainstream media as well as regular press. He does a great job at it.
Well, you hit a very important point, which is the press manipulation, how they build up narratives that are completely baseless. I think Donald Trump's life is a living testament that is the opposite of everything they accuse him of. Now, you founded with him the National Diversity Coalition. And will you share with us which are the accomplishments that Trump secured for minorities and that the media refuses to acknowledge because they keep denying everything good it does?
Yeah. Well, one thing I had a vision on was that, it's kind of like, I use it from a biblical standpoint, the way Christ was. If you, whether you're a believer or not a believer, if you just read the story about how Christ walked, he made sure that he touched all different cultures. It wasn't race, it was cultures. And culture is defined by environment and where you're raised in. You can take like the famous R&B Tina Marie. I'm dating myself. She grew up in a predominantly Black culture, so she learned Black music, and so she was an R&B singer, even though she was a white girl. So it's not so much necessary to define. I'm world traveled.
Totally.
You can go right now to Jamaica, and there's second generation Chinese there that speak fluent Patois that are Jamaicans.
Yeah,
and if you're not looking, you think there's this big dark man with dreadlocks. You look over there, it's like, man, that's a Chinese man. So the race, the color does not define the race. It's the culture. And so what I was trying to answer your question was to bring Haitians, Greeks, which I'm a good friend Christophe Marifazzo ran the Greeks for Trump, and I had different folks from Korean and Vietnamese, and one thing too, Muslims. CJ Tar was our Muslim American for Trump. Jesse Sinja, which was our Sikhs for Trump. And I pull all these cultures together, and we all said, hey, we're going to vote for President Trump, but we're going to unite together with one blood, one nation, under God. Even though we had different beliefs, but we had that one common goal, was to bring these cultures together and support President Trump. Because I've always felt, and this is, of course, biblically too, is that there's safety and strength in numbers. And I knew that if we got all these folks together, and we moved around a lot, we didn't move, we never separated, we moved together. And every time the press would look, it's like, man, that looks like the United Nations, not like the the United Nations, you know what I'm talking about, but the actual, you know, we had all these beautiful people from all these backgrounds, you know, from the Middle East to the Far East and all these cultures and Indian descent and et cetera. And people would look like, wow. So that was part of our combat to fight down this stereotype or this heinous innuendo of President Trump being a racist. So we moved around. We looked very like, wow, look at these guys, you know. And it was very effective because we do have the win. Because remember, we knocked down 17 of the most qualified candidates in the nation's history in 2015 and 16, George. You remember that. So, you know, I think it was highly effective. And you see the fruits of fruition to where he is now. He had the highest Black Latino voter turnout in the nation's history outside of Lincoln and, of course, Nixon. And it's tremendous. And a lot of that has to do with just who he is as a person, because you can't make that up. You can't pretend. Pretending only lasts so long. It's not organic. It's not authentic. So we just gave him the extra support and bought in and brought all these folks together so that the mainstream media or anyone you couldn't pierce through that. It's like, how is this? How are they bringing all these folks together? So I love that. That was my best part of that whole journey. Was I remember Brother CJ, you know, he's also an imam and he's a lawyer by trade. He says, you know, Brother Bruce, I've never broke bread with this many Jewish people in the room. And I'm like, man, this President Trump, you talk about unify, you know, a person that unifies. I was thinking back like, yeah, he brought all you folks together. We had something in common. We were all going to vote for President Trump, but we put a lot of cultures in the room that historically never would break bread in the room. If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So it was a great opportunity to meet a lot of different brothers and sisters from various parts of the world that they represented, and to come in with a common goal and uniting behind President Trump. And that was the best part of meeting all these beautiful people from all these different backgrounds. And we're still together, believe it or not.
As a minority myself, I'm a legal immigrant from Italy. What I can tell is that I really agree with this approach. I mean, we shouldn't play identity policies. These are the real divisions.
Yeah.
When America goes well, it goes well for everybody. In the end, we're all Americans. So I think we should simplify and get to the common sense that has been denied by liberals, Bidens, and all their terrible policies for so long. So thanks for every initiative you're doing.
You know, Italians for Trump, we had Robert Davi.
Oh, yes, I know him. I know him.
I tell you, we checked box. Let me tell you a funny story about this whole diversity thing. So the CBS News, ABC News, they kept calling me and calling Pastor Darrell. They were like, you don't have the LGBTs, or you don't have this and this. And finally I said, listen, we're not interested in sexual preference. We're only interested in culture. That's all. We don't care about that. I said, this movement is for everyone. But one thing we want to do is make sure we invite culture, people of different cultures in, to say, hey, come on, guys, get under this tent and let's ride this train together. And that's what it was. And finally, they gave up because we weren't trying to check social boxes. We were trying to bring cultures together. One blood, one nation, under God. That was our whole, it's on our Twitter logo now. It still says the same thing from 2015 in DCTrump.com. So, you know, I think it's been a blessing and a great journey. We brought a lot of people together, once again, that have historically would never have met each other had they not signed up and joined in the great movement. So it's been a really good ride.
Bruce, you mentioned that you go back to the Reagan era. You've been a lifelong conservative. You believe in Christ as your Lord and Savior, like millions of Americans who are conservative and are Christians in America. However, the Republican Party, I think, is unrecognizable from the Reagan era, obviously through George H.W., George W., and of course, Donald Trump. So the question I have is, what is the biggest change that you, as a lifelong conservative who has been involved in politics going back to the 80s, has been between Reagan and Donald Trump's conservative party?
You know, I've been in business too for 30 years. April, I had 30 years in business too, George. And I think a lot of it has to do with that old philosophy: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, I think the family value structure I'm a very strong proponent of quote hashtag nuclear family. That's on my post. And the order from going back to the Reagan days, and I say the order was God, spouse, family, meaning children, job, politics last. And that was the order. So as long as that order stayed in that sequence, your sustainability for a great success in business and your marriage as well as your family, you had a stronger success pattern. But if any of those were broken or not in order, then there was chaos. So I've watched over years where a lot of conservatives just kind of just gave in. Well, and gave up on something that was such an easy core value. There's no science behind it, but it was the antidote. And let me take it to another perspective here.
Mhm.
So in 1964, 63, I'm a baby boomer. That's the 64, 65, 63, early 60s. In Black culture itself, 80% of the household had a mom and dad. Now we're less than 20%, 25%. So you see to answer your question, we watch the generational curse that affects family values as well as cultural values. And that's something I fight all the time about. We're a Christian Judea nation, the United States. George, your world travel just like I am. I lived in Germany, I've been in Japan, I've been in Korea, I've been all over the world. Matter of fact, I was in Bucharest last year speaking at an event for Make Europe Great Again. That was another story. But it's one of those things where we invite you to come visit Italy. This is our great heritage, our great country. But I respectfully want you to respect our culture, who we are, and our identity, as well as in Greece. I have good friends in Mykonos and all over that, the same thing. Respectfully, I remember having a conversation I was about to go on Al Jazeera, and that's the big one. And one of the guys that worked there was from Britain. And I said, listen, this is 10 years ago. I said, bro, your culture of Britain is transforming. And y'all know where I'm going with this. And it's okay, but the problem is the folks who want to come don't want to assimilate. That key word assimilate, so key, because I love the rich culture of Greece. I love the rich culture of Italy. I love the rich culture of France. I love the rich culture of Africa and all the nations I've been. I don't want to come to your house and George, you say, take your shoes off. No, I'm wearing my shoes in your house. I said, no, George, this is your house. So I respect your culture and your home. And I think, and I know I'm a little long-winded on this, but I think respectfully, to answer your question, George, what do you see the difference is we dropped the standard, we dropped it and said, well, it's different now, so okay. And we kind of caved a little bit when we didn't double down. And this is where Donald Trump has come in. It's like, no, you don't have to accept that. This is what it is, and not try to be a pleaser or stick your finger in the air and say, okay, what's it going to be today? Make a sound decision, double down, America first. This is what it is, and be strong about it. And I think America, over the time, we've gotten used to the traditional politician that, well, they just say it that way, but that's just what it is. And now President Trump's come along and like, no, this is who we are. This is what it's going to be, and double down and mean what you say. And so it's kind of refreshing because it's kind of encouraging a lot of great America First people, as I say, that want to serve. And that's what the whole movement's all about. It's not a cult. It's not anything different. It's just inspiring other folks that want to run. It's the very thing that I said earlier on the show this morning. I was on Newsmax, said, when we talked about Mia Love was the first Black female elected Congress in the history of the United States. In Utah, she of course, y'all saw the news, she passed brain cancer. Great lady. But what did she do? She inspired other Black Americans. Like, I can do that. It wasn't a diversity policy portfolio. It was an inspiration. Exactly. That's essentially how we built the nation. That's all it is. George, where you got your success, someone you saw like, man, I can do that. Just like when I went into business, the same thing. I was like, man, I can build that business too. And so essentially that's how we built this great nation, especially through our leadership. But we've kind of gotten off track over the last several decades, and we're getting back on track. And President Trump's calling it out like, hey, this is what we do in America. This is we say Merry Christmas. I mean, my God, we no, we can't have men competing in women's sports. If you have children, you'll see what I have children, I have grandkids, and you're wondering like, damn, that's common sense. Did you ever think we'd get there in 2025 where we'd actually be debating this? And the reason why we're debating is because we dropped the standard, George, to answer your question. We just, well, okay, instead of like, no, I don't think so. And so now, no, I don't think so is getting more aggressive now. It's growing more wings and getting a lot of people, once again, inspiring people to be courageous and just say, you know what, I disagree with that. I think we need to get back to just the basics, quote, hashtag nuclear family.
I agree. Identity is very important in my country of origin, Italy, and I see in America too. Like when your first society is a family, but you are before even being active in the political field, you are a very successful businessman, and you've been an advocate for small businesses developments. So, how Trump policies are going to improve and help small businesses or owners?
Well, it's kind of like in 2017 when we did the Trump tax cuts, and I'm praying, hopefully that they're going to get that back out and put that back on the table because when you're a small business, we make up there's 30 million of us, and we make up 62+% of the GDP. And so a lot of people's like, wow. I said, yeah, that's a force to be reckoned with because I put it in simple terms that when you get your payroll check, it has the word FICA. And FICA is the biggest chunk that comes out of your check. So the smaller that amount is, the more money your employees have. Obviously, as an employer, as I have employees, you have more to incentivize them to spend more money, grows the economy, more discretionary income to go out and eat. It moves. And it gives power to the employer to give them raises, incentive, buy more equipment and not throw it away into the government. And so that is one major hurdle that we're wanting to get back over again and re-implement the Trump's tax cuts and even get more aggressive with them. And like you saw, even on the tariffs, is like, you look, I always like to tell people one thing about President Trump, he wants to do a deal. And, I know this in real estate too, because I've done this and just the way the banks, when you want to borrow money, whether it be 20, 25% down, whatever, they want to know, get in the game. So president's going across the board, like you saw what he did with Zelensky. It's like, look, you got some minerals, you got some skin in the game. What do you need? Okay, let's do some skin in the game because that's essentially how you protect your home, and that's essentially how you protect America first. And I think the American people have forgotten what it's like to have someone represent their best interest and also trying to push back the negative and the lying narrative of the mainstream media that tries to control and encapsulate people and brainwash them to say, no, that's not right. They're trying to take Social Security away. No, we're not. Stop. I can go on with that. But back to the answer your question, I think, for me, and I served in the first term for the White House for the whole Southeast because I know what it's like to run a balance sheet, a P&L. And the president knows that too. And that's why Howard Lutnick, and, Bassett, all the guys, these are business guys. They're looking at this from a P&L balance sheet statement. Okay, where are our losses? Where are our profits? How do we grow? What are ideas to grow the economy? What are ideas to grow? And most of all, let's get out of this terrible deficit that we're in. And so there's no real science behind it, but I think the common sense has been lacking out of it. And I think President Trump has restored a lot of the great common sense conversation back to the table of what's best for America, what's best for that small business to make them viable. And watch this, here's a key word: businesses that create generational wealth amongst their family members for their children's children.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce, you talked about skin in the game and small businesses being the engine of the GDP growth and the Trump policies. There was this famous plan that was enacted called the Platinum Plan, if
Yep.
I'm not mistaken. Can you tell our audience a little bit about what the Platinum Plan was and how it might relate to exactly what you just mentioned, especially regarding generational wealth, allowing people to have skin in the game, and just promoting small business owners and business in general?
Yeah, I was, thanks for bringing that up. And you can Google President Trump Platinum Plan. I actually wrote one of those little paragraphs over there. I got to participate in that plan. It was wonderful. And one of the parts in there was access to capital with the generational wealth mode. And one of the things, and that I know for a fact, we were in Trump Tower in 2015, and we were there at Pasadena, a bunch of pastors, and we were talking about, especially in Black culture, which is what 14% of the population in the U.S. We noticed the pathway of what's happened historically in Black culture, all the way from slavery, the Jim Crow laws, which is the segregation laws, et cetera, and all the things that went on, but also the void in the generational wealth stream has been interrupted in Black culture. So what do? You go out and you implement good policies. That those policies, for the record, are a win-win for all cultures, first of all and foremost, but especially in minority businesses, and especially minority populations, and especially when you're articulating that and you're encouraging. See, a lot of times people think that in leadership and government, this like, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to do this and that. A lot of it is just encouragement. When I say encouragement, leadership is encouragement, meaning, your words have power. You can build that. Remember, we had a president who says, you didn't build that. Versus I said, no, you can build that. Once again, we're inspired by success through people. And I think that we've gotten away from that, especially in some of our underserved communities. And watch this real quick. So if you're in a predominantly Black community, and let's just say you go to the gas station, who owns the gas station? Most of the time, it's a lot of our Pakistani brothers and sisters, or Arab brothers and sisters that have investment families that buy gas stations. Let's talk about convenience stores or little stores in the community. Who owns them? A lot of our Indian brothers and sisters. Notice how I articulate they are our brothers and sisters because they came and got the same dream. Let's go a little deeper. What about the local grocery store? Who owns the grocery store? Who owns the car lot? Who owns? So if your population is 90+% Black culture in that community, and by the way, you can live wherever you want to live, that's what makes this country great. So be it. So you ask yourself, but when you go to a Latino community, who owns the grocery store? Who owns the gas station? Or when you go to an Asian community, who owns? You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, so where is that? Why is there a gap in this particular culture? Because of the generational gap has been interrupted based on, watch this, historically Democrat policies that pushed most of Black culture in very bad situations. Yes, I'm sorry, they got to own it. That's where it comes from. So what do? We get away from that and we redirect the sail, as I call it, and redirect the ship into more prosperity, into quote building the wealth, putting in ideas into like, okay, what does that access to capital model look like now? I remember one time they said, well, how do you grow that? I said, well, I always tell a lot of folks that don't understand money, go work in banking. Go understand the money stream. Go in there and figure out, okay, how does that work? How does crowdfunding work? How do all these things work? How did you do this? And inspire a culture to put more money and resources in their businesses so they can create the generational wealth. And George, well as I do, we have friends that have 4 and 5 generation businesses. That's generational wealth. And just for the record, too, I'm glad you brought that up on the Platinum Plan. Generational wealth is not always money, it's knowledge. And knowledge and education is part of the generational wealth because the Bible says, my people do perish for the lack of knowledge. I didn't write it, it was written in there. So it's not always about the money, it's the wealth of the knowledge. And so the wealth of the knowledge is just everything from nutrition, everything from health, everything from prayer, everything from just self-sustainability. That's all generational wealth. And then with that comes money. I've always said if you take care of these things up front, the money will always come. But if you worry about the money up front, you compromise the other things here. And so that's something that I like about President Trump. I like the leadership that's coming in. I like the inspiring our country. I always said, we had the 96 Olympics. I was privileged to go to the 72 Olympics too as a child in Munich. So I can say I've been to the 72 Munich Olympics. I've been to LA Olympics in '84, and I've been to the 96 Olympics here. And I always tell people, it's like, why are you guys saying America first and blah, blah, blah? I said, when you go to the Olympics in your country, of your origin, who are you cheering for?
Exactly.
I said, if somebody doesn't cheer the nation on, same way when you have children, if you don't tell your child, yes, you can do this. Yes, you can make that A if you study hard. You can win that race if you train and run hard. You can be winners in this country if you work. That's the same thing. A lot of things that come very successful in our life, and someone speaks it into existence. When someone speaks that into you, your mentor, George, or someone in your family, your dad, your mother, someone spoke that into you and you received it and you said, you know what, I can do this. And that's essentially what President Trump's doing on that huge megaphone. Yes, we can win this. Yes, we can build this. And it inspires the nation. Come on now, I'm going to cut the tax. I'm going to make it safe. And the Kennedys over here, we're going to clean the food up. We're going to build this thing so everyone can win. Not one specific culture, but all cultures of one blood, one nation under God.
Very well said, Bruce.
Yeah, so looks like Obama created the slogan and Trump translated it into facts and opportunities for
That's
all.
right.
Well, you have been very vocal about your faith, and there is a specific moment where I knew that Trump would win the election, and is when he survived the assassination attempt. How much God is informing this new term, Trump term? How much of his driven comes from this awareness that his life was spared for a reason?
So I'm going to share this story that a lot of people, they've never heard it unless I'm in this particular environment where I'm able to talk about it. And I've done it in some speaking arrangements, and I did it, a few other times. But let's go back to 2015, early 2015, right after the escalators. We had about 110 plus faith-based leaders from all over the country, Methodists, Episcopals, Presbyterians, evangelicals, all different, I say flavors of our great faiths, right? And I remember we were in the 26th floor, and it was late in the evening, and the meeting went on for 2 hours and 23 minutes. My wife was next to me. President Trump was right here. Pastor Darrell was here. It was like this huge. George, I think you've been there too. You remember his conference room is very huge. You can put 100 people in there easy, and his office overlooks, connects to the conference room. And I remember, all the pastors and all the leaders are going around and trying to get to know President Trump, and from different parts of the country. And most were faith-based leaders. And I remember right about the 2 hour and 20-minute mark, Pastor Darrell started asking some of the leaders in there, you got anything? And he asked Lance one time, and Lance stood up and he says, I wrote in my Bible this scripture, Isaiah 45. And I'm standing right behind here. And he says, he said, the Lord told me to write this in there, said, you're going to be president. Now, granted, he's never met President Trump till that day. So immediately, follow me on this, immediately after he says it, another faith-based leader stands up, and from Alabama, and he's opened his Bible. He said, I wrote the same thing 4 months before, and I've never met him. And he says, I wrote the word Isaiah 45. Watch this. Immediately to my left, another faith-based leader stood and said he wrote the same thing 3 months before. And these guys never met each other, and he's never met President Trump. So the Lord told me that you're going to be president in that Isaiah 45. So what is Isaiah 45? It's a scripture where it talks about King Cyrus. Cyrus was a brash, bold leader, and he was a guy that built a wall. And he was also a brash guy where I call him the holier than thou's are like, God, why are you picking this man? He's not like one of us. He's not dignified and all that. And this fits the exact same character. So what motivated me because my wife never comes to this stuff ever. But that day she was there because she's usually going to be with the credit card down the Boroughs shopping with her friends. So she happened to be here. And the reason why she was there because she witnessed everything what went on to tell the story. And that's why she was there. And I said, I said, something's just different about this. I said, what is this? It's like, a little business guy in Georgia, pastor from Cleveland. We were just a bunch of interesting, we weren't all these big famous people or anything like that, but we were there for those prophetic words. So that point on, I want to get long-winded. I actually flew back with him because I had to open for him at a rally in Macon. And I didn't even know I was going to speak until I got to the bathroom. He yelled at me, get out there on the stage. I had to do a quick speech, which is another story. But then that night I prayed. I said, Lord, I don't really want to do this. He says, no, you're going to stay with him. He said, you're going to help him and you're going to take some sacrifices. I didn't know what it meant. Of course, I lost a lot of the business and got hate mail and all the stuff because it was very toxic in the beginning, even for surrogates, not just President Trump, for guys that stuck their neck out there, got on TV. George, you know what I'm talking about. And it was really harsh. It was tough, man. It was some days I'm like, man, I don't want to do this anymore. Coon, Uncle Tom, sell out, hate mail, people show up. Oh my God, it was rough. And I thought about that prophecy. I thought about, okay, Lord, what's going on with this? And then, fast forwarding all the fake Russian hope collusion, all the impeachments, all the lie, cheats, deceits, all of this. And then every time it gets so tough, I think back, I said, okay, God, I don't know where we're going, but we're going somewhere with this. And I remember one time he's like, man, you still hanging around? I said, yeah, I'm hanging around because God hadn't released me yet. And this is when I said this in his office when we were in Mar-a-Lago. Soon after, I hate to say that loss of 2020, I went to see him and visit him. And of course, they just put the Kim Jong picture up on his wall. And I said, man, God hadn't released me yet, man. For some reason, I still got to be out here on TV fighting. I don't know why. I'm a damn fool, I guess. But I'm one of many other supporters. I'm just one of the megaphones for that movement. I'm not anything different than any of these guys that stand on the side of the road in the rain and hold his sign up at a precinct poll to say, hey, would you vote for this man? So I don't want to say I'm any better, any different than anyone else, but that was the movement. That was part of the motivation because I'm like, okay, Lord, you done brought this man through all of this. And I was present for that prophecy with my beautiful bride for 33 years. Okay, where are we going with this? And so fast forwarding, we talked. Matter of fact, he called me on the phone a couple of weeks. We talked about 11:30 at night. And he says, you sleep? I said, no, sleep is overrated. And I said, I sleep when you're asleep. He started laughing. I'll tell that part. But just from the coming through the Butler incident and all the things, I'm like, my Lord, who could endure this? A lot of times we just see things in the window, we see, that person, but what do we really know what's going on? What do we feel in their heart and all the things they've gone through? We all have our own testimonies.
Yes.
And I said, there's something going on here. There's something moving. There's something that's like, okay. And this is historical. Y'all are much younger than me, but I'm telling you, this is like history in the makings. You get my age in the 60s, you're going to look back like, man, you remember that time we were talking about, so it is very historical, but it has been a ride. And when things look doom or whatever, I just think about that day, 2015, this ride we've been on, and I still don't know where it's going, but I know that God's in it, the answer to your question, especially when look up at that board and just in the time at Nixon.
Yes.
I was like, okay, I got your attention, but I also need you. I don't want you to go home now, but I'm gonna nick you a little bit. Just we're gonna work with you on this, but I need you to stay around a little bit. And so when you see that and you're part of that and you're privileged to be a part of that movement, especially on something like that, you're just kind of like, okay, and I remember we were I had to do a roundtable here in Georgia. And when we walked in, I had some folks that I invited. They were real nervous and everything. I said, man, calm down. He's cool. So he came in and we talked and he says, Bruce, you've never asked me for anything. I said, no, I don't. I said, I'm an OG like you. I'm not going to ask you for anything. It was so funny. I said, because, I think the authenticity comes in when you work with something or you're committed to something. There's no motive except the motive if you want that person to be successful. And that's kind of like the way I see the marriage that I'm in. My motive is for us to be successful. I'm not asking for anything. I don't want either. I'm going to give you some bread to feed you because want you, love you. I don't want anything in return. I just want you to not be hungry. And so I think that kind of keeps me in check. And there's a lot of guys like me that really, and ladies that really support this great movement, and a lot of things in life that we keep that motive pure. I don't know, it's kind of like, tithing, like Malachi talks about tithing is like, the Lord's like, I don't want your money because you want something in return. I just want it because you're cheerfully giving.
Yes.
And I think cheerfully serving, and that's why I say going to work in administration is not a job, it's serving. And I tell people, I said, don't look for a job, you're going to get in trouble. I said, look to serve, come to serve. And so that's something that I'm starting to see, thank God, on this second term, because the first term was really rough because remember, the mainstream media and the media made it so rough where it literally intimidated good people for wanting to serve. George, you remember that? Man, I ain't going up in there. Man, these guys are, it's tough. And so maybe it took a little nick in the ear to wake up at Elon Musk and millions of others like, whoa, what am I complaining about? This man is out here giving up everything and taking bullets for me.
Yes.
So be it.
Absolutely.
Who am I to complain?
This was so inspiring. Thanks so much for sharing it. And I would like to point out to everybody who's listening to us that there is a reason why people are constantly successful like you. It's because they hold on these values. And I think it's beautiful.
I
really believe you. It's beautiful.
I got a great wife. See, look.
Let's see her.
See, I have it. See, I always tell the OGs, we always like to do this. We always like to put our
that's she's beautiful. Beautiful screensaver. That's beautiful.
Say, that's like the cross when they come at you like
beautiful.
The way I'm married.
I love that.
Beautiful.
George's gonna need one of those, but he's a good-looking guy too.
Bruce, we have that in common. You know what else, Bruce, we have in common? This is my last question. This has just been such an incredible conversation, and then just getting to hear these inspirational things. You're a patriot. You're a God-fearing man. You're a successful businessman. I totally understand. I think millions of people understand why Donald Trump wanted you as an advisor, as a friend, and a confidant. You also represent, I think, the future of the present and the future of the Republican Party. And I know we're talking a lot about serving and doing things for the right reason. So the question I have to you, Bruce, is, are you willing to serve in the future if God calls for you to serve in Congress, maybe run for governor of Georgia? Or is that something that is on your mind? Or
always. There's something brewing now. Full disclosure, but I like to say I've been blessed to come around the sun 61 years, March 12th. So I've gotten more obedient in my thinking than what I was in my 30s and 20s, respectfully. So I'm thankful for that, because I'm like, sometimes what you think you want and you see it so clear is not really the plan God wants you to have. And I've gotten to the point where I've kind of learned, I'll just be honest with you, full disclosure. I thought I was going to do this one thing, but it didn't happen. Even though it's going to blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, we're going to do something different. I'm like, okay, being spiritually mature, there's that key word, to like accept that. I'm going to share a quick story about my friend Ralph Reed told me. Ralph and I were neighbors for years. Ralph, he has a Christian coalition. I always like to say Ralph is responsible for George W. getting elected. I'm sorry. I know what happened. I remember one time because I met President Trump in 1991 in Atlanta as a fan. He was at a local nightclub, a real nice club that he went to after he did a fundraiser. And I remember I told Ralph, I said, Ralph, how do you manage a relationship with someone like, because he was very close to George W. He says, man, when you get involved with folks that are in a movement and you get behind them, you're getting behind the movement, not the person, the actual movement. And he says, one day you might come up with a brilliant idea and it could be the best thing that ever happened policy-wise the nation has ever seen. And all of a sudden someone zips in front of you and they take the credit And then the president says, well, this is so and so, and you're sitting right there, and he doesn't call your name or say anything. And he says, that's happened to me. He said, one day that might happen to you. Are you going to be the same enthusiastic person that got behind that movement? Or is the pride and ego going to overcome you to where you get upset because they looked over you, didn't call your name? And let me tell you, that happened to me. I promise you it did. And I was just I was upset for a second when I thought about that conversation, because I was like, okay, Lord, this is that moment. And it's also, okay, let me see who you really are. Was this all about you being on TV and you doing all this? Or was this something truly that was the right motive? And it was a check. And a lot of folks have gone through it, George. A lot of folks have rolled. I'll throw Cohen's name. He was all this and that and things. And then, I'm going to use it. But there's other names I want to get into, but I won't, because that motive it wasn't about the movement. It was about me.
Yeah.
And watch this. You're going to love this, brother. So last year, I had to speak at 47 Club, and I was right in the middle of an interview, kind of like something like this, and I was on a news hit. And then all of a sudden it hit me about this is going to be the season of exposure, this campaign and this administration. The season of exposure. And you're starting to see, because when you're really trying to do kingdom principles, not politics, kingdom principles. What are kingdom principles? Just doing the right thing. May not be popular, but in your core heart, like, Lord, I know this is right, but I know they're screaming at me, but I just know in my heart this is right. You're going to be protected. You may not think so, but you will be in the end. And the season of exposure will expose. I remember my mom used to say, she was a devout Christian, and she used to say, sometimes when you think people are going to get away with it, she'd say, honey, they're not going to get away with it. They
No, never.
to the Lord.
Never.
You're just kind of like, oh, Mom, I want to go beat them up now, But this whole movement is part of a season of exposure that's going on now. If you think about it, look at some of the things that are uncovering. Look at some of the healing of the lie, cheat, deceit that's been the pay to play that's wrecked our republic. Look, it's all coming out, but it's all God's time. It's not our time. And that's what I've learned. Is like, okay, let me just be patient. You're not going to get away with anything. I say this because I'll just use the Biden family, for example, where the people think they're getting away with this and the laptop and all that. You have to get to the point of peace to say, God knows the truth. So it may not be our time, but eventually it's going to be God's time. And that's his. Vengeance is his, not mine. And that's something that, in order to stay sane in this movement, you've got to put clarity in that, or it's going to run you crazy. And I've seen a lot of good guys get wrecked, George. I know you have too, that kind of slip down into that hole. It's like, nah, I'm good. I got this, so season of exposure.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for inspiring us and inspiring everybody who's listening to us today. Where people can find you?
I'm on the X like everyone else, Bruce_LEVELL. And, I'm like, I do whatever hits I do on TV and all that and work, and that's it.
It's a lot. X is
nothing spectacular.
It is spectacular when you can communicate what you do through, social media, which is now much more powerful than TV, in my opinion. So thanks again for being with us. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. God bless.
Bruce, thanks so much. And we're really looking forward to seeing what God has in store for you moving forward. Thanks again.
I know, right? Yeah, thanks, George.
Thank you.